Hey guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. Today we are going to do another review for you. This one is going to be one of our spoilery discussion reviews, so just be aware that later in the video there will be spoilers, but we are going to do an overall review that's spoiler free at the beginning. So if you haven't read this book, and you don't want to be spoiled, just know that you can't listen to this whole video, but please go read the book and then come back and talk to us about it because we want
Please
to talk
read the
about it.
book.
Yes, yeah.
Please.
We do want people to talk about it.
This is going to be a discussion because it could not be.
Yes. Yeah. So there's that. So we will give you our thoughts, but at the same time, just be aware that this is not one of our spoiler-free reviews, which 90% of our reviews are. Because we need to talk about it with someone. Talk to us about it.
And in case you're wondering, we've already been talking on this Zoom call for over an hour and over text. I don't know how many days. This has been a process.
We'll talk about it. Okay, so today we are here to talk about How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, which came out in 2022. It is an older title. You may see that I have an arc of the book, but we did not initially pick this up for that reason. It was actually meant to fulfill one of our reading challenges for the year. So we both listened to the audiobook of this one because it is technically a full cast audiobook, and that there's a long list of audio narrators that all read different parts of this book. Did we fulfill that challenge? We'll talk about it later. But that was the intent of it. We picked it up for that reason.
Not our fault.
Yeah, it's not our fault. How would we have known until we had listened to it that it didn't quite fulfill the challenge? But I'm going to let Gretchen give you sort of an overview about what this book is about, and then we'll talk about how we felt about it in a spoiler-free section, and then we're going to really get down and discuss a lot of this book with you guys. Hey guys, editing Michaela here. We film these videos chronologically, so we do the introduction and then we do the whole video. What earlier Michaela and Gretchen didn't know was that we were going to talk about this book for 3 hours, and I feel like most people aren't going to click on a video that's 3 hours long, especially one they haven't heard of. So what we decided to do is separate these into 2 videos. The first one is going to be our spoiler-free video where we talk about our overall reviews and all of that. And then the second one is going to be a super long in-depth discussion where we go story by story and talk about everything that we felt about this. So if you are the person who has read it and want to talk about it, if you want to hear us talk about it, I feel like this discussion was one of the best that we've ever had, and it's why I was so reluctant to cut parts of this discussion out in order to make the video shorter. So we're doing 2 videos. The first video being just a regular old spoiler-free review, which is what you were watching, and then a second video where you can go and see our full thoughts on this full discussion, back and forth. Highly recommend going and watch that if you're okay with it. If you're not going to read it and you just want to hear us talk about it, if you're okay with being spoiled, because I don't think knowing the plot of this really is going to change the effect of reading it on you, I do recommend going and watching that. Or if you have already read it, please go watch that video for us and see the long form content there. Enjoy it, because I honestly, this is one of the best books I've ever read, and I would appreciate it if you joined us in that conversation about it. So if you want to hear more of our thoughts on that, please go head over there. Until then, back to your regularly scheduled summary by Gretchen.
So giving you an overall plot summary of this book is really difficult because this book is a connected set of 14 and a half-ish, we'll talk about it, short stories that are all from a different perspective. In the audiobook, each of these chapters or stories has its own narrator, and that's where the full cast element comes in, even though when we thought full cast audio, we meant every character in the same has its own voice actor. But anyway, so the beginning of this book, the first story, if you will, is following the story of Cliff, who is the father of a woman who has recently died in the Arctic, where she was doing a scientific mission trying to stop climate change. So this is a year very close to our own when we are aware that climate change is coming very close to destroying the planet. And Cliff's daughter, Clara, was out there trying to find some type of cure or way to stop that. Not necessarily cure, but like, trying to help fix climate change. And she died. She fell basically into an ice ravine. And they were there. They had found this body, a very iced up body of a very, very ancient human whose existence, look, left them with more questions than answers because it didn't fit into anything we really thought we knew about our evolution. And so Cliff, who is a scientist similar to his daughter, has basically come up to the Arctic to continue her work and also try to be closer, like try to really find some sort of connection to his daughter because they had been not estranged, but had had much difficulty communicating in the years leading up to Clara's death. It's incredibly sad. Just the story alone of the father and the daughter. He finds her journal, he writes to her. But at the same time, the scientific mission releases a plague. So there's sadness and then there's a plague. And this will set up the rest of the novel, is that this Arctic plague is unleashed upon the world. This novel was begun prior to COVID. I feel like this is important. It was finished after COVID and was published, so this is part of the conversation. But it was started prior. But the consequences are similar and worse. And so the rest of the novel will follow characters during the pandemic, immediately post-pandemic, and then a little bit further into the future. And that's something really interesting that we're going to talk about.
Yes. So, I made a post on Blue Sky about it, but I feel like this one is a book that I myself am never going to forget ever. Like it is one of those books that like you can't unread it, and also you are going to think about this forever. Like it is for me a 6 out of 5-star book. There are things that maybe could have been done better or that were not done perfectly, but at the same time, every single one of these stories, I feel like holds up to some sort of discussion, some sort of looking at it. Even the things that maybe weren't choices that I would have made or that felt like they maybe sort of recontextualized or changed the way that we looked at the whole rest of the book, in a way that maybe weren't my favorite, I feel like still were done quite well and really successfully. There was so much writing in here that was really beautiful. There was so much writing in here that like hits you like you're being punched in the stomach. And you just have to sit with that. It took us more than 3 months to read this one book. And that's because it's quite hard to read. Like, I feel like most people who pick up this book probably won't make it past the first 3 stories because of how just emotionally gut-wrenching they are.
First two.
Yeah, even the first 2.
I'm sorry. The second chapter, we're talking about this, but I'm like, the second chapter.
But yes, yeah. So like I understand that this is not a book for like everybody. Like not everybody is going to A, want to, or B, be able to read this book. But I do still feel like this is a book that if somebody asked me like, hey, what are modern books that you think people should read in school or should become a modern classic? This is one of those books that I'm going to be like, I really hope that someday some kid is learning or reading about this in their class because it holds up to that level of scrutiny and discussion. And it really is in a lot of ways a reflection of the human experience that I have not seen done, or at least done this well, maybe ever. So like I can I convince you to read this any other way? Like I don't know how else to tell you how much I really loved this book. And even though there were things that Gretchen and I disagreed on, and that's part of the reason why we've had so many discussions like through text while we were reading it and also the hour before here, and we'll probably still have more discussions while we're filming this video. I think that that's also a thing that is really great about this book is that it isn't just it holds itself up to discussion in a way that not a lot of books do. Like a lot of books we pick up, we read, we enjoy, we put down, and then 2 years from now you don't even remember that you read it. Um, this is one of those books that I don't think anyone who reads it will ever forget, and also will touch you and make you think big thoughts, right? Like really have to interrogate the text and interact with it in a way that not a lot of books are able to hold up to.
Michaela just said that really, really well. And for the most part, like I don't disagree with any of that, right? I mean, you just saw me nodding, like, yes, yes. Like I feel like there are parts of this book that are tattooed on the inside of my skull. I think for me, it's hard because like a lot of what I normally am reading, right, is like romance, for example. And so when I am usually thinking about a rating scale, for me, like 5 stars means that I just like enjoyed that more than anything else in my life. I don't give out 5 stars very often.
Yeah.
The problem with this book is that it's not meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
Right. So if you go to my story graph, you will realize that mine's not at 5 stars. And it is because there are some things that I did have like technical issues with, and also just because I did not enjoy parts of this. But again, it's not a book that's meant to be like enjoyed like a popcorn or candy, right? Like the reason that it took us this long to read it is because every single chapter is a big idea, some executed better than others, right? So first of all, you have to like unpick the chapter on like a literary analysis level, like, did I like the characters, did the plot work, blah blah blah. And then you have to unpick the big thoughts and what was it saying, and then the interconnections between the stories as well, and like some characters pop back up, but you won't always notice it unless you've paid attention to small details that were in those chapters, and then they'll come up a few chapters later. So I mean, the attention to detail in a lot of ways in this book, just on a literary like writing technicality level, um, is incredible. I mean, it's like it was written with a fine tooth comb. Like it's and I think the issue for me, and that's not an issue, but like the book started so strong, like especially the first 2 chapters are so come at you so hard that there were some other chapters that had I read them before, I'd be like, oh, this is really good. But I read them after and I was like, I didn't do the same thing. It didn't rip me open on the inside. I just vaguely felt things.
Yeah.
But like this is definitely, I mean, I would agree, like one of those books that I do think is like an important read for sure, if it's something that you feel like you want to tackle. Because again, when the author started this book, we did not know COVID was going to be a thing. And so I feel like it's possible that for some people, a way like you might have read this book more philosophically prior to the pandemic, but there is no way to unpin this book now from the context of COVID. And so it, depending on your experience, some of it just may feel too real.
Yeah.
And you may not be able to like, you know, think philosophically about the big thoughts because it gets you on such an emotional level, which has happened to both of us in unique ways in this reading, and is at the heart of some of our disagreements because of like personal things that have happened to us. Doesn't mean that we're wrong. It's just that, or either person's wrong. It's just that like, I mean, it was traumatic, right?
Yeah.
Going through
Yeah.
this pandemic was traumatic for people in different ways. Um, but I do think that it's absolutely, like for me, I think one of the best books we had read about like what is humanity prior to this had been Station 11, which honestly has the same problem of like having a plague at the middle of the plot line. Um, I do think that this is better than Station 11. And
Yeah.
that is the strongest praise I can give it. In that particular like realm of literary fiction, I don't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like this type of, as much as I like literary fiction, and Gretchen generally goes literary fiction, like she
I don't
doesn't want
want
to
to be
touch it.
sad.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's not something that I even I can't read literary fiction all the time. Like, as much as I really love, like, I really value and love books that make me think about stuff, I physically can't emotionally deal with doing that with everything that I read. And I totally understand people who only read books for enjoyment and only want to read their silly little fantasy books or their romance books or their mysteries, like whoever, like I get it, I understand, but I do also feel like it is well worth picking up a book like this, even if it's hard, because it is hard. It is hard to read. It is very hard on an emotional level to read, but I think that you as a person get so much more out of an experience of reading something like this than maybe you do from the 700th romance book that you read this year that you don't even remember because you've read so many and it's just
Listen. But I mean, that's why we have this channel.
yeah, yeah.
Right, is out of recognition that it is good to read outside your comfort zone, because Michaela and I were speaking about, like, this is not a necessarily a book we would recommend reading on your own.
Yeah.
In the sense that every single chapter, and you're about to see us do this, can have a conversation about it. This was definitely one that we needed to read together. So if you have someone who you think would like to do a buddy read or a book club that you would like to bring this to, we highly recommend it, because it will generate so much conversation, but also B, it will, I mean, even before this, both of us in different stories, again, because there are all these small little details, Michaela was like, hey, did you notice this? And I was like, no. And then I was like, but I did notice this. And Michaela was like, I totally missed that.
Yep.
So like, if only at like the small detail level alone to like realize all the different interconnections between the stories that you may have missed, let alone the big ideas,
Yeah.
as like a book to read with another person, like 10 out of 5-star recommendation.
Bring it to your bookish Discord groups, bring it to your book clubs. Definitely one that I think that needs more love. And I do feel like that it's really unfortunate that this book came out so close to the pandemic, because if it had come out like 3 years earlier, I feel like this would have been huge, and it too many people were scared of reading and may even still be too scared to read it because it might still be too close. It might still be like too soon for a lot of people, but maybe pick up a copy before it goes out of print and just have one for when you are ready to handle the topic. I think it's important. Clearly, we both really liked this. I do feel like reading it and listening in tandem is maybe the best experience because you have the space to read the details, pause, go back and look at something again if you want to. If something hits you really hard, you can reread that passage. But you do also get the experience of all of these collective voices talking to you. Because again, we started this wanting to listen to a full cast audiobook. And I do feel like, we had a full cast. We listened to all of these
There was
people
a
tell
full
us
cast.
they told us all of these stories, right? If you want to pick up the audiobook and you haven't already, in a world where at least Gretchen and I, despite the Prime package behind me, prefer to give less money to Jeff Bezos than we already do. If you would like to pick up audiobooks and buy them yourself to have to listen to however many times you want to, I use an app called Libro FM. I have a link down in the description that is an affiliate link. If you buy an audiobook through them, I get a credit to get an audiobook. It's not like they're paying us. It's basically just saying if you buy a book, I get a book. So if you want to support us in that way, or at least me in that way, because I get it, but Gretchen doesn't, I can get can get an audiobook out of this. And I would recommend it. Also, Libro FM is an audiobook site that supports local bookstores. So you get to choose any independent bookstore that you want to support. So if there's a specific local bookstore that you want to support, you can do that. If you don't choose a specific bookstore to support, basically that money gets split up between all of the bookstores and they all get a paycheck at the end of the day anyway. So I support the Country Bookseller in Wolfboro, New Hampshire, which is a local bookstore near my grandparents' house in New Hampshire that I really love. That's super cute and always has great reads. It's queer owned. So I like supporting them. You can choose whichever bookstore you want to. You can also change that up. Like, this book I want to buy from this bookstore and this book I want to buy from this bookstore. or you could choose nothing and support everybody a little bit. So I do think it's there. It's comparable to Audible. I think it is slightly more expensive. They do have a credit program where you can get 1 or 2 credits every single month. And then use those to buy audiobooks instead of buying the physical ones. And yes, folks that subscribe to that also get a discount on audiobooks as well, in the same way that you would with an Audible subscription. So it's a good equivalent. Obviously, both Gretchen and I used our Libby app, so you can also get it from the library. But if you want to own it, to have access to it forever and never have that taken away from you, or feel pressured to read it in 2 weeks instead of the 3 months that we listened to it in,
A lot of library loans, guys.
yeah, we had to borrow it so many times. But yeah, it's an option there for you as well. If you listened this far, thank you so much for listening to us talk. This is the longest video I think we have ever made. Still unsure how much of that is going to make it into the final video. I don't know if we can put out a 3-hour long video on YouTube. I think we can. I don't know if anybody would want to listen to it, but I do feel like a lot of the discussion we had was useful and interesting. Again, if you have read it and you want to talk to us about it, in the description below, please tell us about that. Next time, I believe we will be having a reading roundtable, where we will be reading a book that was shortlisted for an award this year. So everybody who's coming to that will have a different book, hopefully, where they will talk about the books that they've read that are some of the best of the last year. And then it's going to be 2025, guys. So we're going to do a wrap up of our reading challenge, of which this was one of them. And we're going to talk about our reading challenge for next year as well. So you look forward to that. If you want to follow us on Storygraph, that's also down in the description below. And we will link to a Storygraph reading challenge. If you want to join us in our buddy reading challenge, please do feel free. And look forward to us talking about